morning and welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. We are setting the standard for accountability, the ownership of your choices, and responsibility, the ability to respond to those choices. Let each care for self and all will be cared for.
I know you guys are objective over there, that you just report the news as it is. Oh, I know. CNN makes a... I know.
Was that supposed to be a laugh line?
It wasn't supposed to be, but I guess it is.
What's on the vice president's schedule today?
Well, she's traveling and talking to voters and getting her message out there to the American people, something that she's been doing from the very start of this campaign and something that she certainly did when she was President Biden's running mate as vice president. But look, you just mentioned the speech she's going to be giving in
that's right. I was asking about today, and I don't think she's got any campaign events on the schedule today, does she?
Well, she and Governor Walz have been traveling across the country. They hit nearly every battleground state last week. On the campaign trail, they raised $36 million within the first 24 hours of Governor Walz joining the ticket. And what she's going to be doing Friday is taking her economic message directly to the voters in North Carolina. I certainly don't want to get in front of exactly what she's going to say, but she's going to talk a little bit about how she's going to make sure that she's putting consumers first as part of her economic plan. She's going to take on corporate price gougers. She's going to take on junk fees. And that's something that, John, she did when she was Attorney General of California, something she continued to do as the United States Senator of California. So she's going to be taking that message out to voters, and I look forward to seeing more of what she's going to say on Friday.
I think we all do, and I'll ask you more about that in just a second. The reason I was asking about today is because it seems like she has time, if she wanted, to do an interview with a member of the media or do a news conference, correct? There does appear to be that time if she wanted.
Well, look, she has said on the campaign trail that she would be doing an interview at some point. She said that, I think, last week during a rope line or when she was talking to reporters. But look, what is important here, John, is that she is taking her message directly to the American people. She hit a number of battleground states. I think we had 15,000 people in Detroit last week, 12 to 13,000 in Nevada. She's been taking her message to the voters and drawing large crowds. So she's actually having those direct conversations.
But not today. All I'm saying is not today. She could do an interview today, I would think, because she's not out there today.
Well, look, she's taking her message directly to voters, and just because she doesn't have an interview schedule on her public schedule doesn't mean that she's not taking her message directly to voters.
Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. Those two clips I thought were very interesting to kick off this week's episode. The first one was the Colbert Show, and I just thought it was very interesting that the truth, the reality, falls out of his mouth, and everybody knows that it's true, and that's why it got the laugh line that it got. What was interesting was her response, right? Because in her own way, you could tell she was a little taken aback from it. The second one I found even more interesting, and you're going to see this later on in another clip towards the end, is this woman who is she's shocked, first of all, that the interviewer is holding her to accountability. And he keeps asking the same question. And do you notice how she doesn't answer the question? She deflects to something else. Well, Vice President Harris is taking her message to the people, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. But then he comes back and goes, yes, but she doesn't have anything on. And then he keeps pursuing that particular line of questioning, which I found pretty interesting, to be honest. What I liked about that moment was the look on her face. Go back and look at that particular clip, because you can even hear she has some kind of an audible response where she's like, oh, she is indignant that this guy is holding her to accountability. Then the question to ask yourself is, what level of entitlement has this person developed for themselves to think that, any reporter doesn't have a right to ask a question and to get an answer? And I would have enjoyed if he had called her out on it and said, listen, you keep deflecting and you're not answering the question. And I'm going to ask it again until you answer it. He tried to do his best. I mean, to the point where you could see that she was visibly annoyed by it and probably would like the interview to end. I don't know. I can't get in her head. But most of the time when people get backed into a corner, they want to say or do anything to get out of that moment. Go to a commercial. But the part that I want to point out is notice how she's deflecting from answering the question. This happens a lot. If you watch these pundit shows, if you watch these interviews, you watch these press conferences, you will see that there are some people that they don't want to answer the question, so they answer another question that has nothing to do with the question you asked. Now, somebody that's a good reporter, that's a good host, that's a good pundit, they will pick up on that and they'll turn around and go, excuse me, you didn't really answer my question. I asked you, how come the VP doesn't want to do an interview today? Because I've asked it now 3 times, and every time you deflect by telling me that the VP is taking the message to the people. I can appreciate that. What I don't appreciate is the fact that you came onto this show, I'm asking you a direct question, and you won't answer that direct question. I don't know what your motivation is in not answering the question, but I'm going to ask it again and then see where that goes. I'm guessing it's probably not going to go very well, because a lot of times people will get hostile in that situation because they don't know how to manage it. Why don't they know how to manage it? Because they lack integrity. Why do they lack integrity? Because they lack accountability. They don't want to be held accountable for the choices that they make and the things that come out of their mouth. They want to play a game, and a good pundit, a good interviewer, a good journalist will not play the game. They'll sit there and say, I've asked you this question and you refuse to answer the question. And I think as you see things go on and on, not just with this election, but when you start to see really good people that are on X, they're on Instagram, they're on TikTok, they're asking questions and they're not letting people get away with trying to deflect, which I think is great. We're moving to a place where we're not wanting to be manipulated anymore. We don't want to be cajoled. We don't need to have some sort of emotional story that wants to deflect from what the reality is. Because that's the manipulation, right? Is when people start to tell you a story, they start to give you an excuse, they start to tell you their why. We don't care. All of that is just garbage. It's all noise. And so you gotta get through the noise, and you gotta get to the signal, and you gotta hear what is it that you're signaling by what it is that you're saying. And that's when you have to basically dig deep. You have to do that deep dive into a conversation. You have to listen, but you're listening for the reality, that which is without emotion. And that's where the nuggets of, all the goodness, everything that's tasty and fun. So this next one I thought was kind of interesting. I just saw it the other day. This gentleman, Will Cain, he's filling in for Jesse Waters on his show, and he's interviewing this Democrat strategist. Again, I want you to listen for every time she tries to deflect, and then listen for the lie. And now this is really good. Will Cain is very good at this. He has not perfected the art of this, but I will tell you, he is way better than most people that I watch on these shows. And he started calling this girl out. It's one of the better pieces of an interview session that I've seen on these pundit shows. And I like his style of how he manages it.
If we're not going to platform people guilty of misinformation, would you deplatform Joe Biden today? Today, Joe Biden put out the fact-checked and proven lie that Donald Trump called Nazis very fine people. It's a hoax. It's a lie. It has been proven. It's Snopes, which has come out in the last couple months, said that is absolutely not true. He did not call Nazis very fine people. Not only Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris put that out today. So my question for you is, should they now be deplatformed?
He called the people, the Proud Boys, which is what I think they were referring to as Nazis, as very fine people. So let's make that very clear.
His words were literally this. No,
on
Nikki,
the anniversary of Heather Hayer's death.
I'm not talking about the white supremacists or the Nazis. His words were literally as I just quoted. I am not talking about the white supremacists or the Nazis.
Very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists. Okay?
He said those exact words.
He was talking about the Proud Boys, but we see them as the same people. So I would, you trust the FBI. I hope you do.
He didn't even mention
do you trust
Proud
the CIA?
Boys. That's
do you
you
trust
reading that in.
Do you trust the NYPD?
Okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to point out about that particular one. First of all, you saw again with this audible response of, she's just so indignant that this guy, Will, is pursuing this and that he's not letting it go. The other thing is that Will asked the question, do you think that these people should be deplatformed? And she had said earlier in the clip that, yeah, that's like, people should be deplatformed if they're saying, lies, misinformation, whatever it is. So he's now holding her to account. Like, okay, if you believe that about these people, then it also applies to these other people. The whole thing is shenanigans. But my point in bringing this clip to you is so that you can see this manipulative game that people are doing. They play this thing where I just can't believe you're saying that. And then I love the part where she goes, well, we see them as Proud Boys. And again, oh my gosh, hats off to Will Cain, because he goes, look, they didn't even say that. He didn't say that. He says, you're saying that. You're implying that. And she goes, but we see them all as the same. Well, okay, but that's your filter. That's your problem. That's not the president's problem. He said exactly what he wanted to say, and now you're attempting, for whatever reason, we don't know what the motivation is, right? Because we can't get into her head. We can only conjecture. But whatever the reason is, you are applying a different filter. Okay, so this is like really important, this particular piece, because in your life, you do this. We all do this. We hear one thing and then we apply it through our filter, whatever that filter is. If you want to read more about this, Daniel Goldman, he was a psychologist, I think, wrote a book about EQ, emotional something or other, not emotional quotient, but EQ, something or other. And what was interesting is he talked about the amygdala, this portion of the brain that gets hijacked and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's all well and good. But my point about it is that what is happening is that we hear something, we filter it. If we have something unresolved in us, we have now filtered it through whatever is unresolved in us. Then we take that information and we project it outside of us onto the situation that we are now experiencing, which may or may not have anything to do with it. That is the piece that I really wanted to hone in on, throw a light on for this particular segment of the podcast, is that when we get hijacked with something emotionally, then we're no longer in the reality. And that was the case with her. I just thought it was really interesting that she basically showed her hand. She said, listen, my strategy is that I am making up stuff that isn't there because what is reality doesn't comport with what I emotionally think about Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is talking about the Proud Boys. He's referring to the Proud Boys, and those people are racist. And if my endeavor is to call him racist, I have to make sure that I make my point very salient that he's a racist. And the only way I can say that is that, well, he meant the Proud Boys. You don't know what he meant because that's not what he said. He said that those people, the neo-Nazis, should be denounced, or whatever word it was that he used. But that piece is so important, and if you get a chance, go back and listen to it again, hear her response in it, listen to her audible shenanigans that she's doing, trying to deflect, because a lot of times what will happen is a person like her will make some sort of auditory response, like the first clip that you saw from CNN, in hopes that they're going to throw that person who's interviewing off their guard, so that all of a sudden they're the kind of person that they want to virtue signal. Oh, I don't want to offend you. I don't want to say anything bad, and so then they start capitulating. Okay, well, never mind. Well, then the issue never gets addressed, and it must be addressed. It must always be addressed. Lying, half-truths, not speaking to reality must be addressed. Now, you decide whether or not you want to do that, and the context of which you want to do that, and how often you want to do it. But when you get this piece clear for yourself, you will pick and choose the moments where you say, that is not true. This is the reality. I don't know what you're doing there, but I need to call you out on the fact that you now basically are a liar.
Oh, hello, liar.
And we are at the end of another podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Hit that like button if you would. It does change the algorithm, so it brings this into more people's feed so that they are able to share it and enjoy it as well. Also, share it with your family and friends. You never know if it might help them in their journey to accountability and responsibility. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for. See you next weekend.